everybody. I don't know what just happened just then. All of a sudden, it said I wasn't streaming anymore and I had to restart everything. So I'm sorry I'm a couple minutes late here. Welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. I am Maria Spitalnik, and I am here to help you make more quilts in less time with a lot less stress. So I apologize for the technical glitch, and so I hope that if you were thrown off while I was doing my restart and everything, that you come back on. But we're here every first and third Wednesday of the month, so if I'm not live like when I should be and you don't know in advance I'm not going to be here, then just keep checking in, because I will get there somehow, some way, by hook or by crook. So me and technology are not the best of friends, and so hopefully it's going now. It seems to be. So our tip for this week is something that we started talking about a while ago with one of my guilds, and it's called JOT, just one thing. Now, the reason for this is that the hardest part of any task is starting, okay? And so we need to break whatever task we have down into the smallest possible unit so that we can at least do one thing towards our goal. So let's say your goal is that you are going to start jogging. Okay? Your one thing can be the teeny weeniest little thing, something you're almost embarrassed to not do. So for example, maybe your just one thing for going jogging is putting on your running shoes and lacing them. And then you go down to breakfast. That's fine. It's a start. And then the next time you do your one thing, well, just lacing the shoes isn't enough. Maybe what I'll do is I will go and I will jog to the neighbor's house, which is, 50 feet away, and then you come back. The idea is that starting is the hardest part, and once you start, it's easier to go ahead and continue. So when we're looking at the tracker that we talked about in the past, you can break that tracker down into ridiculously fine things. One seam on the twisted 4-patch quilt. Maybe it's one side, put on one side of the binding. Maybe it's, spend 5 minutes in your sewing room today. Whatever it is, make it small, but that's your one thing. And the idea is that once you start, it's easier to keep going. So I finished my one thing. I'm approaching the corner on my binding, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish the corner. So I do the corner, and then I'm sewing, and it's all anchored down, so I can stop here, but you know what? I think I'm just going to keep going. And next thing you know, I've put on the whole binding. Maybe I haven't done those last couple of inches that are kind of fiddly, but I've gotten 90% of the binding on when I only had one part of one side was my goal for the day. So when I work with a lot of my clients, what we try to do is 15 minutes a day to improve your life. Now, I don't say 15 minutes of organizing, because if you go through this process and you get to a point where you don't have 15 minutes worth of stuff to do every day, that's the perfect time to slot in something else you'd like to accomplish. Maybe it's reading something in your field of study or your industry. Maybe it's painting. Maybe it's browsing for new patterns for quilting on the internet. Maybe it's listening to a podcast. It could be anything that's going to make your day better. Now, the things that don't qualify for that 15 minutes are your normal maintenance kind of things. So laundry doesn't count. Doing the dishes doesn't count. Walking the dog doesn't count, unless it's a new dog and the goal was to have the dog to get more exercise. So that's a little bit different. But then once you've got that habit established and you're not going to expand it anymore, then find something else for your 15 minutes a day. But it's just one thing. Get it started, and then you'll be able to get done whatever you want to get done. So that's our tip for today. Now, I did get an email this last week asking me a question about the twisted 4-patch. And I had just enough time to grab a shower and finish this one seam that I started yesterday on the twisted 4-patch. So let me pull these up rather than going around the table to get them. So, oops, that's my microphone. Hold on. It's the part that I'm supposed to clip to myself. I mean, I clip the microphone part here, but this is the part I'm supposed to put like on my pants. And it's annoying, so I don't do it very much. Okay, so I am almost to the end of piecing the top for the twisted 4-patch. Now, what we've got going here is I'm assembling the end of the rows. So here we go. You can see here. All right, hold on, let me move it here. There we go. Okay, so instead of doing the last little bit in 4 patches like I've done the rest of the quilt, I had 3 large 4 patches that go across, and so I'm just assembling those in rows, okay, of 3 long. And so this is the only time during this process that I had to think about which directions my seams went. All the rest of the time, since I was pressing to A and pressing to D in my 4 patches, they automatically all fit together without me having to think about it. But now that I had 3 of them going across, the 4-patch thing didn't work as well. So I figured out 1, 2, and 3 would go to the right, 4, 5, and 6 would go to the left, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's 5 rows, the last one being the singleton row that's down here. So I have these other 2 here, okay? And so the question that I got was about squaring up. Those of you who know me know that I tend to square up quite a bit. Oh, I didn't realize this light wasn't on. Let me turn this on. Maybe you'll be able to see me a little better. There we go. Hopefully that's better. Okay, so squaring up. I love to square up because I like it when my pieces go together exactly right every time, because it saves me energy and effort. However, this quilt doesn't need it. Now, if, however, when you are looking at your patches and you're going to the next size up, if you're, instead of at 4.5, if you're at 4 and an 1/8, the cool thing about this quilt is you can trim it down. And so it just means you trim down all the squares to the same size as you go through each round. So it could be significantly smaller when you're done than what I have here. You know, if you're trimming 1/8 of an inch off of each block every time, you'll wind up with a smaller quilt. But if you like to square up, I'm all for it. And this one's easy to do because since it's already twisted, nobody will ever know, and you don't have to worry as much about it being exact. The only thing I would worry about being precise is that when you square it, you're going to want to make sure that the major block intersections are at the right point on your ruler. So if you're trimming to, let's say, 4 inches raw, then you're going to want the seam intersections to line up in the previous blocks at the 2-inch mark so that those lines are going to line up nicely. However, if they don't, it's fine. You could even cut the bigger parts wonkier when you square them up. There's no rule that says you can't do that. I do like, in this particular case, that the 4 patches don't line up, but the 16 patches in the middle do, and then that everything lines up with the outer squares here as we go from the 2-inch finish to the 4-inch finish to the 8-inch finished. But if it doesn't, it doesn't matter, because it's a twisted 4 patch. It's not perfect. Now, most of my 4 patches, my intersections came out nice and clean. So I like that. That's just something that bothers me when it doesn't happen. But they're not all perfect. There's a couple of these that are off maybe 1/8 of an inch. And that's fine. Okay? This is ultimately probably going to be a charity quilt anyway. I wanted to test a concept, and so I'm making a throw. I'll either give it to a friend of mine if they like it, or I'll give it to charity. It's fine. Okay? If you're doing this for yourself and you want to be more precise, go ahead and square it up. Okay? But this is the top slightly less than half of the quilt. And I think it came out pretty nice. It's not exactly the confetti feeling I was going for, But I thought that it's going to look okay when it's done. Now, I am going to be finishing this probably in the next week or so. The top will be done. But I have to get ready for that big trip that I'm doing to Nebraska. So I'm certainly not going to be getting it basted, and I'm not going to be getting it quilted probably until July. So this is the other half, just so you know, minus the strip. So I'm going to have it up on the wall the next time you see it, and the top will be complete. But I'm not going to have the whole quilt finished. It's just not going to happen. I am also... Oh, I didn't mean to knock those over. Hold on. Today's just been a day of knocking things over. I was on the job at a client's today, and it was 87 degrees in the house. And we worked for 4 hours, and by the end, you could wring my shirt out. So I got home, I showered, I grabbed a bite to eat, and now I'm here. So my brain is a little fried, and I apologize for that. I'm also incredibly dry, so you're going to watch me drink a little bit. However, something I've been working on is my hexagon project. Now, those of you who've seen that before know that I'm doing a seascape. So I have 5 different levels of blue, okay, and then within each of those levels, I've tried to get a variety of blues, lightest to darkest, within that zone. It's not going to be perfect. Part of my goal with this quilt was to only use scraps. So a lot of my quilts, you'll notice, I'm using stuff I already have. So it hasn't been perfect. And so I was working, I finally got the last of the top tier of the blue finished, and it's got a wave to it. And so I was talking to my husband. My original plan had been to have everything above the waves white. But in order to get enough shades of blue, the ones at the very top are pretty white. So I've been thinking about it. And I was thinking, okay, what if I did green and see if I have any like grass kind of material? And I thought that might work. But his suggestion was rocks, little pebbles or something, and see what I have. So I'm going to be getting behind here probably tomorrow or the next day. That's where my browns are. And I will be looking to see what kinds of rocks and things I have, because I realized that as you come out of the water, it gets lighter, 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 and then there's a fine line, and then it's the sky, which is again more shades of blue. And I wasn't sure how I could convey that that was the sky versus the water, and if it was darker or a more intense shade of blue than the top of the water, that didn't make any sense. So I've been going around and around, because I'd have been thinking, I would do the white, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll do blue with white clouds and like birds in the background. But I didn't find anything that I really liked that I could do that with. So I've been giving that quite a bit of thought. If anybody who's watching this has an idea, feel free to chime in either in the chat, or you can shoot me an email. The email's over here, mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. And I'd be happy to listen and get your opinions. But I'm also hoping I will not be done. That's not a question. I still have thousands of seams to do in this quilt. However, I'm going to show you how I organize the pieces for that maybe next time, because it's really pretty simple, but it's easy to get lost if I just kind of dump the pieces out. But I do have a problem with this quilt that I can't remember if I showed you or not, so I'm going to show you something here anyway. But anyway, so I'm hoping that I can have, right now, because things are in process, everything is downstairs, including the map for where the pieces go and everything, and I didn't want to bring it up and lose track of where I was. So that's part of the problem. And I'll have that for you next time too. But there are parts, I have the paper pattern here that I showed you before, some of it. I I kind of just tossed it here in my trash can, to be honest with you, because I didn't think I was going to need it again. But let me show you what part of my problem is. Let me switch cameras here. There we go. Okay, my son borrowed my camera for his thing yesterday, so I hope that's good enough. If you notice, on this particular hexagon, okay, this side is a different color. Now, I could have made a piece that's shaped like this and a piece that's shaped like that, and then using the flat back method, sewn the two together, and then sewn this piece to it and this piece, and done these all as individual pieces. But what I've decided to do instead is okay, this gives me my piece number and the designation for myself as to what I'm doing with it. But I am going ahead, putting these right sides together, because I've marked what pieces I need. I'm sewing these on my sewing machine. Okay? So since I'll have a machine stitch here, and I'll press it open, then I can just lay it on the hexagon later, such that the seam goes across where I want it to go. Just like that. Okay? Yeah, that light is not helping as much as I'd like. But then when I sew it down, I'm going to get that look that I want with a lot less effort manually. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Now, there are some that are going to take 3 pieces. So like, I saw one of those here. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can spot it. Here's one. Okay. So, hold on. Before I get too far, let me clip this all back together. I don't want to lose the track of what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. So, can you see this piece? Okay. This corner's red, this corner's white, and then the middle piece here is black. So what I'm doing with this is I created some paper piecing layouts. So I can put the black color on, and then go ahead and sew the red side on and press, and then the white side on and press. Then I'll take it off the paper, put it on my hexagon, and just like the last one, fold it around and stitch it. So I've been doing that. Now, I have found that I seem to be a little bit different. Shocker. In that I've been doing glue basting lately. And I was working with a couple of the pieces, and I was not happy with trying to take out the paper. And so I think I'm actually going to thread baste this. There's already several hundred glue basted ones, so I'm going to use the glue basted ones, don't get me wrong. But I found that it was a little bit harder to do the stitching than it was with the thread basted. And of course, in order to take it out, if it's thread basted, all you have to do is just snip the threads and it's done. The glue, I think some of it I'm actually going to have to mist with some water to get it to release, because in order to get it to stay down, I had to use quite a bit of glue, especially where I have these intersecting seams on corners. So at least those I think will be thread basted, if not the whole rest of the pieces. So there are over 1,500 pieces currently in this quilt. Now, those of you who know my husband know he always has an opinion when I ask him for one, because I was stuck on that dilemma of what to do with the waterline. And so he was thinking there should be rocks, and then maybe above that I should have some tree trunks and maybe some animals and some grass, and then maybe above the trees I have some clouds. Well, that would add probably, to do even a minimum amount of that, is going to add somewhere around 400 to 500 more hexagons. And there's already 1,500 in this quilt. So I'm thinking no. I think I'm going to say no. Um, but I did like the rock idea. So if I can find, especially if I can find rocks of different scales in my stash that are all in the brown family, then I'll intersperse some of those and have some little ones and some bigger ones and things like that. Because since I'm coming up through the ocean and we've got all the fish and everything down below, then if I was looking at from a fish's perspective, I might only be able to see the rocks, kind of like the White Cliffs of Dover kind of a thing. But in their scale, I might see sand and I might see rocks. And I was thinking about doing sand as well, but I have sand on the bottom of the ocean floor. So I don't know if I want to have another set of brown at the top that's just sandy colors or what. So I'm kind of hemming and hawing, which is why I'm talking about all this, so that if you're interested, you can chime in. So that's what's going on here at the Spatelnik house in terms of quilting right now. If you are not in the area, today was over 95 degrees outside, so being in that one house and it being 97 was actually better than being outside, but not by much. Tomorrow's going to be kind of interesting. We're doing a crawl space. So I'm going to be on the job at 8 o'clock in the morning on a job that I have to squat and walk like a duck. And we're going to be cleaning out basically a bunker. This guy had all kinds of food and stuff stored under there, which unfortunately meant he also has rats and things under there. I think they're all dead, but it's still going to be a huge mess. So I'm going to be in there in overalls because it's going to be dirty. And that's what I'm doing tomorrow morning. And then I get to go to an attorney's office, which is why I have to use overalls so I can change. And then I have another client, and then I'm going to come home, and I'm going to be one giant puddle. So if you see me on the road or anything like that, feel free to wave. But if I'm, cursing up a blue streak, you'll understand why. But I'll probably be too tired to do it anyway. But, that's just how it's going to be this week. It's going to be in the 90s and humid all week. So it is what it is. I am working on the stuff for Nebraska. If this is your first time watching, I'm going to be doing a 2-day seminar on hoarding disorder in Nebraska to their Adult Protective Services Department. And so I am currently doing final handouts and final slide prep and that kind of stuff, which is why I know I'm not going to get to quilting this quilt until after that. The first day of teaching is actually on our 30th anniversary, my husband and I. So we're going to spend all day teaching about hoarding, and then I have to go to bed early because I have to teach it again the next day. But it's going to be fun. So we're going to have a good time with that. I'm also trying to get the second edition of the book done. I'm also working out some new patterns for you guys. There's a lot on my plate right now. So if I seem a little scatterwitted, that's why. The patterns I was thinking about, at the beginning of the year, I offered 4 different types of patterns that we could do as a quilt together, which is why we're doing the Twisted 4 patch, because that's what you voted for. I also want to say that since we'll still have half a year left, I was thinking maybe we could do another quilt too. And so I'm debating doing something that uses maybe large half square triangles, maybe some stars, or hens and chicks, or something, something where we can use up some of our half square triangles that we may have in our stashes. So if you could drop me a note in the chat or shoot me an email, then I'll work on that, and then we'll have that to play with next time. So that's something else that I'm working on for you guys. Now there's a huge project I'm considering. obviously I don't have enough people yet that are subscribed that might be interested in doing a very large project. But I am considering doing something where we have every week there's 1 or 2 blocks that become available, and then putting out the videos for how to do them, and then doing them here with you during the live stream. And so we could build a sampler quilt that way, but these would all be fairly small blocks. I'm thinking I could put the patterns out in various sizes, so maybe 4-inch blocks, 8-inch blocks, and 12-inch blocks. But that means I need to have the time to actually make the patterns as well in advance so that you guys could go ahead and get them from the website. So this is just something I'm kind of noodling. So if you think that might be of interest, please let me know. And if you have any general questions or suggestions, I'm more than happy to take them. But I want to make sure that what we're doing here is something that speaks to you. I want it to also be something that if you're brand new to quilting, that you can have some good solid success with, but if you're an experienced quilter, you're not bored. So it's kind of tough to find that balance. I'm working on that. And from the comments I've gotten so far, it seems that we're doing okay with that. If you are watching this and you are not a subscriber, please like, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we're going to be on. But I do want this to be a very friendly, opening, and welcome place. So you're more than welcome to put in chat questions. You can email me, and I'm happy to talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. Exceptions to that are politics, religion, and anything else that's currently an incredibly divisive topic. I don't want this to become a place where there's flaming. This is a place for friends to meet, to chat, to talk about something. Now I know I do 99.99999% of the talking. I'm hoping more will happen where people put things in the chat. And responding to your questions is also something where you have more involvement. But I don't think a lot of people have good quilting buddies that they can talk to and ask a lot of questions of. Now, of course, if you belong to a guild, yep, you probably do have some. But a lot of people that I've been talking to and who've been emailing me don't have any sort of a support system. And, you know, they may have friends and family in terms of that kind of support, but not quilting support system. And it's hard to explain sometimes, especially to husbands or wives, why you take a perfectly good piece of fabric, you chop it up into a million pieces, and then you sew it back together such that you wind up with a smaller piece of fabric when you're done. And that's just something that my husband will just occasionally think about and shake his head and say, if it makes her happy, it's fine with me. I don't understand it, but I don't have to understand it to know that she's enjoying it. But being able to talk to somebody who really gets it can sometimes be really helpful and can make you feel like you're part of a sisterhood. You have friends out there who get it. So please, if that is something that you would like to have more of here, I'm more than happy to take care of that. I did have someone who suggested that I do more actual organizing, like general household organizing tips here on the live stream, and I do occasionally do some. The ones like today, the just one thing or the 15 minutes to get started, those are pretty universal. I have a lot of clients who will set a timer. Now, when I say 15 minutes a day, it doesn't even all have to be at the same time. I have clients who will set a 5-minute timer, and they'll just do something for 5 minutes. And then 3 times a day, they'll do 5 minutes. And then if you don't get any more done, you've still met your goal of 15 minutes for the day. You can be guilt-free and move on. This gets really tough for some people, especially if they're in a really severely cluttered home, 15 minutes doesn't look like you did anything today. But that's an hour and a half you would not have spent otherwise improving your home situation. Yeah, that's still not a lot, but it's a lot more than you were going to have. And if that 15 minutes propels you to another 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, that in the course of the week that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So I do use a lot of the things that I talk to you about in other parts of the home with my other clients. So I just want you to know that this is definitely a situation where if you think outside the box, there's a lot more uses. Now, when I talk about things like thread bobbin storage, that's a little bit more precise. These rings here aren't good for a whole lot other than bobbin storage. Unless you're a beader. Because you could put beads in this and then you could stack them. And when you stack them like this, they actually stay pretty close together because they're rubberized. And you could have small beads in each level. And then they'll stay put, but you can still reach in with a needle and pull out the ones you want. Thinking outside the box is one of the best organizational tips for general purpose that you can have. I get a lot of my organizing supplies in the weirdest places when I go shopping. And I will get things that are designed for something else, but will do the same job that I need, and often at a much less expensive price because it's not being marketed specifically to us as quilters. So as an example, I was in, I think it was Joann Fabrics, I'm not sure. They had a set of a utility set of drawers. So there's little bitty drawers. Excuse me. And I was thinking, there's lots of things you could do with that, and that's fine. But no, I definitely didn't need anything like that. And then I was in Lowe's, which is if you're not in the area, it's kind of like a Home Depot or another big hardware chain. Ace, that kind of a thing. But at Lowe's, because it's a big box store, they had almost exactly the same thing. Instead of being in baby blue, it was in gray, and it was $10 less. And it's designed to hold screws and little bitty things. So the quilter one showed on the picture things like needles and bobbins and, gewgaws and hoosits that are quilting related. And then the other one showed screws and nails and gewgaws and hoosits that are hardware related. But it was the same thing. But because it's hardware, it was cheaper. It was also a different color. It's kind of like the pink tax, So one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the solutions that may work best for you won't be found in our section of the store, our quilting section. If you're at a Walmart, there's the fabrics and that kind of stuff that they have in there. It may not be in that area the right organizational tool for you. It might be in hardware. It might be in housewares. It might be in office supplies. So you need to kind of put on your quilting brain for what it is you need to accomplish. I need to be able to store these items in this kind of a way. So for example, I don't think I have my little one up here. Oh, I do. So I have this little thing I showed you before, right? I also have the big one I use all the time. Okay? This is next to my sewing machine. And obviously the pencil did not want to be there. Okay. So this is next to my sewing machine. I also have one that's next to my chair down in the living room. I also have one in the front room that I sometimes do some sewing work in. But this is the one that I travel with. So I have some open-topped purses kind of things, but they're seriously subdivided, and I can bring one up to show you next time. But this fits precisely in there. So when I'm traveling in June, since I'm taking a plane, that means being in the airport for hours first, then on the plane, then then I'm driving, then I'm going to be in a hotel room. I'm going to have some time to work on the hexagon quilt. Everything I want to use is going to fit in this, inside that purse. So I can pull it out, use the things, and then stick them right back down, and they're not going to go anywhere because this is going to hold them in place. Okay? This I won at a door prize at one of my guild meetings. So that's why I have this, and this is why I bought the others. But next to my chairs and stuff, I have these with the pens and the pencils and all that kind of stuff. I also have one in my bedroom, in my vanity sink, because things like eyebrow pencils and mascaras and brushes and all that stuff go into it. So they're all upright. I don't get all the bristles of the brushes mangled. I don't have to hunt around for what I'm looking for. They just plop right in. And it's really easy. When I bought them, some of them were designed as makeup. Some of them were were listed as office organization. None of them said for quilting. No sewing room organizer had those things. Except for this one little one, if you went to the actual shop that's on the side of this. If I go to their particular website, it's there for quilting. But I found a ton of these and a ton of colors, all different price points. These green ones I got on sale because they were on clearance for $1, which is why I picked up 3 of them. I have heart shapes so that, not because I wanted the heart shape, but because it's got a broader base to it, because there's 2 hearts. There's a heart here and a heart here, and they overlap in the middle. But that's the one I use for the makeup, because this is so narrow. If I had the heavier brushes, it's going to tip over fairly easy. So by having that extra meat on the short on the long side, what it means is that it's a much more stable unit. So that's where I've got stuff is in my makeup area, because it will not be tipping over. So when you're shopping for organizational stuff, whether for your home kinds of things or for sewing, the first thought should be, what is it I'm trying to accomplish? Not, how do I store my brushes? Okay? What do I want to accomplish? I want to store these items. Okay. If I'm going to be storing those items, are there any restrictions on how they can be stored? So for example, some markers, especially some of the fancier ones that you get like at a Michael's or something like that, say that they need to be stored horizontally. Some say to store them tip down, some say to store them tip up for best results. Well, this little carrier thing would work fine for the tip up or tip down, but not for the ones that need to be horizontal. So, are there restrictions on how something is being stored? Where do I need to access the item? It does me no good to store something I need to access when I'm working on my work computer in the basement if it's stored on the second floor of my house. Unless my goal is to have to do a lot more stairs, and that is never going to be my goal. Okay? So where am I going to use it? Are there any inherent dangers that would be related to how it's stored? So, I need to store gasoline. Not a good idea to store it next to your heater or your furnace. Kind of makes sense, but it's a hazard. If it's something that shouldn't be in a place that's steamy, then don't store it in a bathroom where you take hot showers. But the half bath where you just use it for the commode and washing your hands, that might be fine, but it's something that'll make a difference in how you can store it. Then there's the question of who needs access to it. So if it's just you, that's one thing. If it's you and your spouse, okay, that's going to limit things further. If the entire family needs access, then that limits where it can be put even more. So you can understand what I'm talking about? That's for anything. Now in your sewing room, if you have a whole room, that's great. If you don't, then your sewing space, whether that's the dining room table, or maybe that's going to be a sewing basket, whatever it is, your sewing space. You're going to need to ask the same questions. What do I need to store? What are the parameters for doing that? Is there anything that I need to take into consideration? Are there any hazards? Okay? And all of those go into play here in our quilting rooms as well. So I hope that that's helpful. And when you are looking at a problem, think about these things before you worry about exactly how am I going to store them. And you'll find there's a lot more options available to you. So I have a case across the room here that I'm debating on whether I want to use or not. It'll be a repurposing. It's designed to hold fancy pens. Okay? And I'm not storing fancy pens anymore. So the question becomes, can I repurpose it in a way that will be useful, not just as a way to repurpose the container? Okay? A lot of times people buy containers without having a plan for how they're going to use them and how much they really need and all of that. And so they wind up with a ton of organizational equipment and none of it's right. So you always have to think about the items first and then go buy the thing that's going to solve the actual problem. Okay? Sorry, still dry. Okay, so I don't know if I talked about this before. Now this is an inherent sewing thing. This is not useful for anything else. Okay, and I think I talked about this, that I'm using this to wind up my bobbins now. This has been working perfectly, even with those weird bobbins. I have not had the chance to get in there with that rasp I told you about, to go ahead and clean out the center so that it fits properly on my machine here. I don't know if you can, no you can't, it's exactly out of range. My sewing machine is directly in front of me. And so the bobbins that I bought, although they were supposedly going to fit my machine, don't. They're too small by just the tiniest bit and mostly on one side. So I can jam them on from one side, not from the other. But that's not going to be good for my machine or for the bobbin. But I can put them on here, spin them up, and then they work fine either in the bobbin case or on the thread uptake for my machine. So I've been doing that a lot. I've also been using up a lot of my old metal bobbins that I had before in my upper thread guides, simply because I have them. I'm not using any of the machines that use them right now, and if I don't need to use that machine for 5 years, that's not going to be good with the thread anyway, and so I want to use them all up. So that's what I've been doing, spinning up a lot of these little tiny spools that only fill half of a bobbin, so I'm doing that a lot. But what's nice is that since I have so many different colors in my hexagon quilt, I'm using them up here first to get those seams done. So I'm putting in a medium blue, which will be in the bobbin, and then whichever colors I need on the top. And I am changing them just for the fun of it. I could just put them all together in shades of gray, light, medium, and dark. And that would do just fine. So again, for speed, that's probably the way to go. But since I have so many little bitty amounts of thread from these little baby spools, I'm going ahead and I'm changing them out so that I can use them up, basically. And then what's going to be nice is I will take them off of these and put them onto bobbins, and then I will take this downstairs and I'll have the threads that are the matching colors approximately to do the actual sewing the hexagons together. So any little bits that are left from doing my seams, it'll get used anyway. So that's working out pretty well. I will be, like I said, taking the hexagon quilt with me on the trip. I do about, I'd say I only average 3 to 4 seams. I know they're only 1-inch seams, but I do teeny weeny little stitches. I can't stop myself from doing tiny ones. And so I'll only average 3 or 4 of those a day. So at 1,500 hexagons times 6 is 9,000 seams. It's going to take me a while. And holding it tight is hard on these joints here for me. So I can't really, do an 8-hour day or anything like that. So I'm just kind of puttering along with them. Again, my just one thing every day is that I'm going to do at least one of those seams, even if I'm tired. So when I go downstairs, they're right next to my chair. The thread is there. In that case, I think I'm using a card instead of the bobbin. And so I've got thread. It's on a needle. It's in my pincushion on this side. When that runs out, I'll put more on from the card. And I'll do 1 or 2 little seams just in front of the TV tonight. And that's it. That's all I'm going to get done. And someday I might do 6 or 7 or 8. So it kind of evens out. But every day, just one thing to advance that quilt. Okay? Now, some days it hasn't been any sewing at all. Some days it's been sorting out the colors. Especially because I did all the fish first and then I was filling in with the blue because I didn't know where I would need a half of a hexagon in blue and some of these weird shapes and stuff, so I wanted the fish done first. So laying out all of the different shades. And then another day it might have been cutting the 2.5-inch squares that I'm going to be using on the hexagons. Another day it might be putting things in order or thread basting or whatever it is that I'm going to be doing. So my one thing in the day might not always be that 1-inch seam. But I am trying to do at least one 1-inch seam every day, plus whatever else I have time to work on. So it's going to be very, very slow progress, but it's going to get there. I already have several little areas done, and so when I travel, I just have triads of them to put together. And when those are done, then those will get sewn together into bigger units. Rather than starting in the middle or at the top or bottom and doing the whole thing, by doing them in these smaller units and then assembling them together into slightly bigger units, I'm going to be able to travel with them a lot longer than if I was doing these big long things. That you can really only do at home. So if I started in the middle and I did it that way, then I would find after just a few rounds it's going to be this big, and I can't really take that easily from place to place to place, and they don't fold very nicely. So I'm doing all these little triads, and then they're going to go into 6 diamonds and then to a new triad and things like that as I'm working my way. Just like we did the 4 patches for this quilt. We started with the little 2-inch finished 4 patches in the middle that became 4s and 16s, etc., and we worked our way out. By doing them as 4 patches, I only had pieces bigger than this today. And I only had 3 across times 5, and now I'm putting those seams together. So I would have been able, if I had been hand piecing this, to just do almost all of it out and around rather than having to be at my machine to do it. So that's part of how you're planning out your pattern work. And it makes a huge difference in your success in a project like this, if you know how you want to do it. If your goal is to do the entire quilt on your machine and you never want to do handwork, then still having smaller pieces going through is easier than wangling these giant pieces at the end. Could you do a quilt, one big giant log cabin, okay, with 1-inch strips, okay, which is kind of crazy, but you could do it. If you start in the middle, you could just keep working your way around and around, but by the end, you're going to be manhandling these big giant seams through your machine each time. Whereas if you did a quilt with lots of little log cabins, then you would put those all together and then maybe 4-patch them and then maybe 4-patch those. You'd still only wind up maybe this big, and then you put them all together. Is it going to be the same design? No. There are some things like a giant log cabin that's going to always have to be done like a giant log cabin. But think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you're choosing that pattern or why you're making it that way. If you think your way through the logistics, then you'll be able to find ways to simplify and then simplify and then simplify to where it's much easier to control. Okay? I've known people who will do a project and it gets away from them because they didn't think how to accomplish the goal before they started doing the work. Okay? So, in my case, this hexagon quilt, I kind of figured out what I wanted to do, but the color selection, I left somewhat to chance. I tried to divide up my blues into 5 different layers of blue. I'm sure I messed some of it up. Some of the layers are going to be a little bit darker above than a layer below, particularly when seen from a distance or up close. You know, these things happen. I could have obsessed over it. I decided I don't care. I've been to the ocean, and you know what? It's not always a perfect gradation of color. You would think it would be, but it's not. Waves come in, it changes the density of the water. Other things happen that change the density of the water. It could just be that a fish relieved himself and that layer of water is a slightly different color. I don't know why, but it happens. And I decided for this project I didn't care. If I was truly concerned about it, what I would have done is gone to the store and bought ombre fabric. Okay? And what I would have done was take my 2-inch strips starting at the selvage, and then on the next piece I'd have gone down half the height of my strip and then done my 2-inch pieces and then interleaved the two so that it would be an almost perfect gradation top to bottom. That sure seemed like a lot of work, which is fine, but it also said to me I'd be buying a lot of fabric. And the goal here was to use what I had. Now, if I had somebody who wanted to make this quilt and wanted me to provide the fabric, then I might consider doing something like that. Because it'd be a lot easier than just going to my stash and pulling the fabrics. I have had... Alright, our time is almost up, but I did have someone who spoke to me who wanted to talk to me about having me do all the prep for a hexagon quilt, this ocean design, and to actually provide them with the finished hexagons, and then they would sew the quilt together. I don't know how I feel about that. It could certainly be done. You know, it's not a big deal to make the hexes. They're easy, they're fun. And And I actually prefer making the hexes to sewing them together. But I really don't know if that would be something that would be worthwhile, and I have no idea what it would take to do it in terms of how many hours and what the fabric costs and stuff would be. So I'm considering, and I was wondering what kind of services you think people would be interested in having along those lines. If you go to the website, I know there's still problems with the website. At least it's up and stable, but some of the things aren't there that should be. So we're going to work on that. I just don't know when. But something like this quilt here. So I know people all the time have kits and they do kit work. And so some people like that and some people don't. And so I don't know if offering kits for something like this would be of interest to people. And so I'm asking what your opinion would be. And whether it would be, in this particular case, just the fabric cut into strips, or whether you think people would be interested in having like the actual half square triangles pre-made and trimmed up, so then they just have to go from that point. So I don't know. I wonder sometimes how much people would be interested in something like that, where a lot of the initial work is pre-done, not just the fabric provided to do it. Because I think a lot of people are scared to go from the very beginning, or they want a shortcut because they want to assemble something like this, but they want it done a lot faster than they have the time to do it. So if you wouldn't mind, if you get a chance, if you want to drop something into the chat or shoot me an email and tell me what your opinion is on that, I'd love to know. Because it would take quite a lot to figure out what it would take to purchase the fabric, cut the fabric, punch out all of the hexes as an example, or make the half square triangles in terms of time and everything like that. So then the question would be, what would it really be worth to people? So, like I said, I'd love some input if you have any to give. Our time is pretty much up, according to my clock. Let me see what the computer says. Yep, 2 minutes. If you haven't liked and subscribed and hit the bell, please do if you've enjoyed it. If you've stuck it out this long, today's been a very meandering day because, like I told you, my brain's been kind of fried up a little bit today. I promise next time will be better. But if you've enjoyed it, please come back, have a good time with us, and go ahead and do all of the button pushing that needs to happen. So I'm here the first and third Wednesday of every month. Even with the Nebraska thing I'm doing, I should be back in time for that first Wednesday. I've only missed one since I started doing this, so I'm pretty happy about that. I haven't gotten the videos edited, but at least I've made them. So that's my one thing. It's good enough. So have a wonderful week. Enjoy your balmy temperatures if you're experiencing what I am. If you are experiencing cold because you're in Australia, then bundle up and relax. And I hope to see you back here in 2 weeks. All right? Take care. And let's go do some sewing, shall we? Bye-bye.